All right, it's finally here. FFU Builder 2507.1 preview. Our UI edition is finally out. We're expecting this to be in preview up until the Windows 11 25 H2 release coming here this fall. And for those that don't know who I am, I'm Richard Balsley, Principal Solution Engineer at Microsoft. I've been in this role for quite some time, focusing on our education customers. However, I've been now moved into our state and local government education role, so I'm handling most of our U.S. education public sector business outside of Fed. If you have been working with me for some time, you know that we do a lot of device management work here with SCCM, Intune, and imaging. And so now we're finally able to show what we've been working on for a while now. So let's jump right into it. So for a quick start, let's take a look at what we need. So we need, from a Prereqs standpoint, you're going to need Windows 10, 11. We do support server and LTSC now. We don't support IoT Enterprise. We do support IoT Enterprise for LTSC builds, but we don't actually support native IoT Enterprise. That will be coming later. We just haven't added the support for it. It should be fairly straightforward to add, so we'll be doing that here shortly, probably when we go to general availability. From a Prereq standpoint, you also need PowerShell 7.5. At least that's what I've been testing on. You probably can get away with using something less than 7.5. What you can't do, though, is you can't use Windows PowerShell 5.1. There are some changes that we've made that require functionality that is only in PowerShell 7 and above. So my recommendation is just go install the latest release of PowerShell. At the moment, it's 7.5.2. So go ahead and install that, and you should be in good shape. You'll also need to install Hyper-V, and after you install Hyper-V, you will need to configure a Hyper-V switch. That switch can be an internal or an external switch. I personally use external switches, but both will work. You'll also need to download the latest FFU release. As of this moment, the latest release is going to be 2507.1 preview. And that will be posted in the releases page in the FFU repo. You will then want to take that release, it'll be a zip file, you'll download that, and then you'll want to extract the FFU development folder to see FFU development. You can put this onto a different drive. It could be in a different folder. It doesn't have to be in this location. We do support customizing this. However, you are going to want to make sure that wherever you're putting it, you have enough free disk space, because creating these virtual machines and creating the FFU files and servicing them takes a lot of disk space. So you want to make sure that you've got probably at least 100 gigs. I don't have a exact number because a lot of this depends on what you're going to be doing. But if you're running on like a 20 gig disk, you're probably not going to work. It's probably not going to work well. I mean, the default size that we use for the VHDX is like 30 gigs. And so 20 is not going to be enough. So you want to make sure that wherever you're putting this, that you've got enough available free disk. USB drives, we need USB 3X, it could be 3.1, 3.2, just whatever it is, it should be a USB 3 drive. Do not use USB 2 drives, they're too slow. The drives can be removable, or they could be external hard drives. A lot of the USB sticks that you see today, some of them might actually be SSDs, and those drives are fairly fast, but they don't show up as removable. They actually will most likely show up as an external hard drive. So we've added support for both removable and external hard drives. And once you download, you may need to unblock all of the files after downloading the release. Sometimes things get hit by the mark of the web. And so if you're using Smart Screen, I think it's Smart Screen that requires this. But if you're getting hit by that and you're unable to run the scripts, then it's most likely that you'll need to unblock the files. This wasn't a problem in prior releases, but I know that some people that I've talked to internally with the new release, they're saying, hey, I need to unblock files. So if that does happen when we publish, then that's something that you'll just have to, you'll have to handle that. Okay, Now, once we've installed PowerShell 7, we need to make sure that we're actually running PowerShell 7. And you can run PowerShell through terminal, which is what a lot of people do. So you'll want to run terminal as admin, but you want to make sure to select PowerShell, not Windows PowerShell. Or you could just go to your start menu, search for PowerShell, and you could right-click Run as admin. Make sure you're running PowerShell. For a lot of folks, this is PowerShell core is what we call it internally. It could be pwsh.exe, but make sure you're running PowerShell 7. So to do that, if you're running terminal by default will default to Windows PowerShell. And the way that you can delineate this is first it just says Windows PowerShell, but also the blue icon versus like the darker navy blue icon. It also shows as PowerShell instead of Windows PowerShell. So just make sure you're running PowerShell 7. Otherwise, the script is going to error out and it'll tell you need to be running PowerShell 7. And then once you've opened up PowerShell and you've got an admin prompt, run the build FFU VM_UI.ps1. It does support adding a verbose switch, but you don't really need to use it. And you're going to see why as I start demoing what the solution looks like, which is what we're going to do right now. Okay, so let's pretend that we've downloaded the zip file for the release. Because I haven't actually published the release yet, I can't do that, but I've got the files already here that I'm about to publish, and so I'm just going to copy these from my internal repo, and then I'm going to paste them into my C FFU development folder. So just pretend that you've downloaded the zip, you're extracting the zip, and you've put the files in C FFU development, and here they are. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to run this through PowerShell. So from the start menu, once you install when you install PowerShell 7, you'll have a PowerShell 7 x64 icon. If you don't know where to get it, just do a search for PowerShell. You can do it through Winget. If you do Winget install, I think it's Microsoft.PowerShell. You can also install it through that. There's a number of ways that you can get PowerShell 7 installed. Just make sure that you're installing the latest release. But we don't want Windows PowerShell. We want actual PowerShell 7. So right-click here and go to Run as Administrator. Now, once we do this, we will have a window that looks like a command prompt. And we're going to go to C FFU development. And then we want to run build FFU VM_PS1. Now, like I said, you could include verbose if you want. I'm not going to. I'm just going to hit enter. And then this will bring up the user interface. So the user interface, it's fairly simple. It should be mostly intuitive. What you'll notice is that it hasn't been stylized. We will get a style added to it before GA. I'm actually waiting on a bug to be fixed before putting the Windows 11 Fluent style. So if you've seen any of the Windows 11 UWP apps, like the Store app is a good example of one, that uses something called the Fluent UI style. And so we're going to be using that. I actually had I had it working with Fluent, but there was a bug that was kind of game breaking, and we didn't want to release with that bug in place. It caused some functionality to not work right. So we've held off on that, and so once the bug is fixed now in a preview release of .NET 10. So once .NET 10 gets fully released, we'll release the new Fluent look and feel. It's going to look much better than the unstylized look right now. But when you open it, this is what it looks like. So you'll see on the left, we have our navigation tabs, and then on the bottom, we have some buttons to save config files, load config files, and then build the FFU. And so the way that this works conceptually is that this user interface is nothing more than a way to create a config file. However, there are things you can do within it that you can download files, you can download drivers, you can download apps, and we'll see that here in a minute. But you don't have to do that. You can just have it build your config file and then pass it to the PowerShell script. But there's a lot more to it than just that. And so you'll see that here in a minute. So let's just walk down the left here and look at the different tabs. So the first tab is our Hyper-V settings. Now, one of the challenges that most people have with using just the bare script by itself prior to the UI release is how do I get my switch, my VM switch name, and how do I get the host IP address? And I didn't want to automate this within the script itself because I couldn't determine whether I was getting the correct switch and IP address from the end user. At least the one that I was more confident in, because a lot of people could have a number of different network adapters and VM switches and all sorts of different things on the machine. But in the UI, it's actually better because you, as the end user, can just select which switch and which IP you want. So what we do in the UI is we actually look for all the VM switches and we'll show you the switch names. And so on my machine, I only have two switches, external and default switch. So you just pick whichever switch you want, and we will switch to the IP address if you change the switches. So we automatically figure out the IP address for you. So if you haven't statically assigned a IP address to a specific switch, or rather to a specific network adapter, then it doesn't matter now, because now we'll just determine whatever it is. So if I get a new IP address assigned to a machine for my VM switch, the script, this doesn't care. This will always find whatever the latest one is. What would matter, though, is if you create a config file, the config file is going to have it hard-coded in the config. So you'll have to update your config file, but the UI itself is going to automatically pull the latest IP address from whatever your switch is currently exposing. You can also just type in the name of your switch and the host IP address. If for whatever reason we're not finding it, then you can override or do whatever you want there. So I generally just keep the external switch. You can use internal switches, which is what the default switch is, but that's completely up to you. I haven't had a lot. Disk size, virtual memory, and processors. What you'll notice, and you're probably already seeing it in the video here, is that we get these tooltips. I've tried to make it so that just about everything has a tooltip. It may be a bit verbose, but I want to make sure that people understand exactly what each setting is doing. So for disk size, 30 gigs usually is plenty, and it's a dynamic disk. If that isn't plenty for whatever reason, you can always adjust the size and increase it if you want. From a memory standpoint, I default this to 4, but in general, if you've got the space for it, you've got the extra memory, you may want to add 8 to it. Personally, when I build VMs, I try to keep it at the defaults, and 4 has generally been fine. But depending on the apps you're installing, 4 may not be enough. So you might want to up that to 8 or maybe something higher. I don't really think most people need to go over 8 because all we're doing here is just building a VM, we're installing your apps, and then we're going to sysprep and capture it. So you really don't need a whole lot of resources for this, but 8 is probably a good space to be. Processors, 4 is usually fine. You can go higher if you want. I never really change VM location, and I never change the VM name prefix. Up to you if you want, but I've always kept these at the defaults. And then logical sector size. So this is something that comes up a lot when people have issues. They'll post an issue in the GitHub repo, and they'll have an issue where the FFU that they've built doesn't apply to their machine. And one of the reasons that can be is the logical sector size is incorrect. In most cases, the 512 logical sector size is the right choice. However, some devices nowadays, and it's actually been for a while now that we've had 4K-N or 4K hard disks, and these are devices that have a 4K logical sector size. 4K is, it's not as common, but we're seeing it more common in the low end with devices that are shipping now with UFS hard disks. So if you have if you're in the education space, a lot of the lower end devices used to ship with eMMC drives. So eMMC, very slow, but very affordable. Now that is shifting from eMMC to UFS. UFS is faster, It's not SSD, but it's faster than eMMC. However, all of those devices, at least all the devices that I've got my hands on, those have all been 4K drives. And why this whole thing matters is because with FFUs, we're doing sector-based copying of a hard disk, and we're taking that and we're putting it onto another machine. So because we're doing that, we need to make sure that the sector size matches. And if it doesn't, then you end up with an error when you apply the FFU to the machine. So you need to make sure you get this right. And I've updated some of the logging and some of the console output when the script fails to let you know that you have a mismatch, or you might have a mismatch with the logical sector size, and you might want to recreate the FFU with the correct logical sector size to make sure it works. So spent a lot of time on this, but it's very important to understand that you're getting the right value set. For Windows settings, if you were to leave these at default, we will download the latest media creation tool ESD file. So you don't need to pass an ISO if you don't want. And in fact, as of this recording, we just updated the Windows 11 24H2 media with the June cumulative update. I'm hoping that continues moving forward, but I don't know if that's going to or not. But if you were to download it today, running this just as it is, you will see that you will get the June update of Windows 11 24H2. However, I do recommend that most people put a Windows ISO in here instead of relying on the media for a couple reasons. One, you don't have to download the ESD, so it's going to be faster. But two, if you can keep your media up to date and use the latest media, it's going to make the overall process much quicker because servicing the latest media, or not even having to download the latest cumulative update, is going to make things much, much faster. So provide an ISO if you can. If you don't want to, or you don't care how long it takes, then you don't need to provide an ISO. We'll just download the latest ISO from the media creation tool. Now, when you download from the media creation tool, we don't have a whole lot of options here. For our Windows release, we only have Windows 10 and Windows 11. And when I change to Windows 10, you'll notice that Windows version and some of the other things will modify depending on what you've selected for your Windows release. However, if I pass an ISO file, so if I go and I grab the Windows 11 July media, so you'll notice that this has changed. We don't have the same options that we saw earlier, like the language. The language is necessary for the downloading of the ESD. It's not necessary for the deployment. The deployment's it's gonna be whatever's in your media. It has nothing to do with what is selected here. So that's why we don't show it when the ISO is here. But if I remove the ISO, you'll notice that Windows language is selectable because this is how we determine which media to grab from the media creation tool. And it's the same thing with the media type for consumer. We use these two options to figure out where to download. But if you're passing an ISO, you don't need those. But when I pass an ISO, now a lot of things unlock for me. This is where I can see server, I can see LTSC, LTSB, and depending on what I'm picking, so if I were to deploy a server ISO, there's no way to accurately determine which ISO you are passing into here to show the accurate Windows release. So for instance, if my Windows 11 media here is Windows 11 24H2, but I can pick server because I don't know exactly what your ISO is. So just understand that just because you put a specific Windows release ISO in here doesn't mean that's what it's going to actually select. You need to make sure that you're picking the correct Windows release. Don't just put the ISO in and then not pick the right thing. You need to make sure that you're putting the ISO in here and then you're adding the correct Windows release. You're selecting the correct one. So for me, I put Windows 11 24H2 in here. I'm going to pick Windows 11. If I did server, I go back to my ISOs and I go pick like server 2025. This doesn't default to server 2025. It defaults to 11 because that's what most of you are going to be using. So I need to go pick Windows Server 2025. And then when I do that, some of these things change here as well. So I can only pick 24H2 for Windows version because that's what Windows Server 2025 is. If I were to have selected Windows Server 2022, and that was what my ISO is, then I can only pick 21H2. So we try to match as best as we can what the release and version is. But in some cases, like Windows 11, there are 3 different options. And so this is up to you to make sure that you're selecting the right item. So the too long didn't read on this is you want to make sure that you're matching and going through each of these options to make sure you're getting the correct thing. Don't just assume that because you put an ISO in here that it's going to figure it all out, because there's no real automated way to do that. So let's go back to Windows 11. And we got our July 2025 consumer build. We got 24H2 selected. We have x64. We're not doing ARM. We support ARM. Loosely, we support ARM. There's some weird issues with ARM. We'll get into that in the deep dive video that I record later. But for now, pick x64 and then pick whatever SKU you're going to deploy. Most of you are going to probably select Pro, given subscription activation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about subscription activation. In the other video from last year, from last July for 2407, I spend a ton of time talking about subscription activation and media and how well that works. I'd suggest taking a look at that. You can also put your product key in here. This is primarily needed for business media. If you're deploying business media with enterprise or education, you'll want to put your product key in. If you're doing pro, you generally don't need to, as long as you're pushing out consumer media, because that's going to take the product key from your firmware. And then lastly, optional features. I know this list isn't complete. We need to complete it. I don't know how many people are actually using the optional features aside from like .NET. .NET FX 3, I think, was what most people add. There's obviously others, but yeah, I know it's not complete. It changes, I think, with every Windows release, so we need to make sure to keep it up to date. It's just kind of tough to keep track of all the different optional features. So if you find something missing, just let me know, and we'll look at getting them added. Okay, for the updates tab, just straight checkboxes for each of the different updates. We can install the latest cumulative update, latest .NET, update the latest version of Defender, which is the Defender client, as well as the Defender definition files. There is always going to be a new definition from the public downloadable sources that we make available. There isn't an updated version of Defender that you can download that isn't as up to date as what you get from Windows Update. There's always going to be a definition that's just slightly newer. There might be a way to go directly to the Windows Update service and pull what they're deploying. I haven't personally looked into it. What we do is we pull from the update catalog, and that seems to be newer than what's available on some of our public websites, but it's not the newest. But it is a heck of a lot newer than what's built into Windows, because what's built into Windows is years old. So we get you pretty close to getting completely up to date there, but we just can't quite get there yet. We do update to the latest version of Edge, we update to the latest version of OneDrive, and then we install it as per machine, not per user. And the reason for that is because when OneDrive is just installed by itself and it updates on a per user basis. And so we flip this over to per machine, and that's just how that works. We also added the Microsoft, or it actually should be the malicious, not Microsoft. It should be the Windows malicious software removal tool, not Microsoft, so I'll fix that bug. But this is the MSRT, so we've got support for that built into here. And then we've also added support for the latest microcode for LTSC in Server 2016 and 2019. This isn't going to really be necessary too much longer, given that LTSC 2016 support is going to be going out here fairly soon. But if you do deploy these, I hope you don't have to deploy these, but if you are deploying these, support is here. And then we also have support for the preview CU. You can't install both of these, so we have some code in here that just makes sure that you're only picking one or the other. Okay, now applications. This is where there's a lot of nuance. So if you're using the old 2505.1 build or any of the prior builds that use the appless.json, that's still here. But we no longer use the install apps and sysprep.cmd file. That's been completely changed. And when I go through the deep dive video, I'm going to explain all of this in greater detail. But you're going to have to redo your apps. And I guess the best way to show this is in the apps folder, you used to have an apps list or an install apps and sysprep.cmd file. And it was a really long list of commands to run, your own custom commands. There's some code in there to run and install Microsoft Store apps. But it was getting to be too complicated, at least in my opinion. There was too many things going on. We were modifying this CMD file that originally was just really designed to install Office and maybe some apps, and then we added store functionality for store apps, and it just was becoming way too messy. So I scrapped all of that and went to this orchestration model. So now what we do for installing applications is we still leverage your appless.json file. We provide some sample files here for you to look at and understand, like how we expect the file to be formatted. But now everything from installing the applications, everything is being done through this orchestration folder. So in this orchestration folder, there are a number of different PowerShell scripts that run, and these scripts are what are responsible for installing various things. We also dynamically create new scripts on the fly as the process is running. So for instance, like installing Office, you don't see anything in here for installing Office, but we will create an install Office.ps1. We'll create a install Edge, install Defender. Those will dynamically be generated, and then they'll be removed when they're no longer needed. So this folder is somewhat dynamic, but it's much different. And so the way that this works is this orchestrator.ps1 file. This is what's responsible for calling all of these other files. And so again, we'll have a much deeper dive on how all this works. You can look at the code yourself. It's not too complicated, I don't think, but you should be able to understand it and see how and when things install. I think it's better. I think it makes it a little bit cleaner for us to support, and for folks to maybe not get themselves in a bad spot. So let's go back to the UI and kind of understand how this works with that. So by default, when you open up the FFU Builder UI, the install apps is automatically checked. Why is that? Well, the reason for that is because Office is also automatically checked. So my assumption is that most people that, if you've never used this tool before, you're probably going to want to install Windows 11 with Office. And if you do nothing else, that'll create you a Windows 11 24H2 build with the media creation tool media from the June cumulative update release as of today. And it'll also install Office, the latest release of Office for the current channel. And that is what we see a lot of people default to. That's what they want. If they just want to test the tool out, that's what they want. But if you don't want that, then, and you see install apps and say, well, why I can't uncheck this? Why can't I remove that? It's because install Office is checked. You uncheck that, then, that and the updates. That, Defender, Edge, those will then remove the install applications checkbox. And the reason why that is because in order to install Defender, Edge, OneDrive, or the malicious software removal tool, or Office, we need to be in a virtual machine to do it. We can't service the media with those things. We can service the media with a cumulative update or with a .NET CU, but we can't do it with other applications. We have to actually be in full Windows to install those. So that's why you'll see this by default. So we'll just keep that as is, and then let's go through and look at how we integrate Winget. So Winget is fully integrated, and when you check the install Winget applications box, we need to validate whether Winget is installed and whether the module for Winget in PowerShell is installed. So we click the check Winget status button, And this will tell us that we have Winget version whatever and the module version. And so these are the latest versions as of this recording, and everything looks good. If it didn't look good, it would prompt me, or it wouldn't prompt me, it would just start installing the latest module or the latest version of Winget if I was on some really old version. And once those are installed, we'll then get this, this list view box and this search box. Now, when we search for applications, fairly straightforward. If I wanted to install, let's say the company portal, do a search for that, and it'll take a few seconds to find the company portal app, and it'll show it in the list view box once it finds it. And we'll see that there are two versions of the company portal, one from the Winget source and the other from the MS Store source. And in the Winget source, we have this architecture dropdown. And so this is where I can select which architecture I want to download. And for most people, you're going to want to keep your architecture at x64. If you're using ARM, you'll probably want to use that. But in some cases, you might need both architectures. You might need x86 and x64. And so for this scenario, I would keep x64, but let's try and download this. So we have company portal, Winget x64, all that looks good. And I can click this button that says download selected. But we error, and we have this message that says skipped, use MS Store source instead. The reason that we have this is because in someone's infinite wisdom that had uploaded this company portal application to Winget, they decided to package it and take the store binaries, which I think that's the only version you have of the company portals is the store version, but they put it in the Winget source, and they uploaded it to, it's actually uploaded in two places. It's in Winget, but it's also on the Microsoft Download Center. And the formatting of it is not like any other store app. The dependencies folder does not match. It is, the file name itself isn't even named right. The whole thing is just a complete mess. And so instead of using the company portal Winget source, don't use it. You can't, like if you wanted to manually install it, sure, go ahead, it's fine. It actually installs, it works. But I didn't want to code around the process that whoever had packaged it used, because no other application is packaged the way that that one is. So instead, what I recommend is for the company portal, use the store version. That works well. So we can go ahead and click download selected, and this is going to go out and download. Now, on my machine, I get this prompt to sign in. You will get this if you're on an unmanaged machine. If you're on a machine that is joined to a managed tenant, doesn't matter who you are. If you're on a managed tenant, you're signed in with an Entra ID account, you should not get prompted to sign in. But if you're on an unmanaged machine and you're downloading MS Store source applications, you will get prompted. You'll actually get prompted twice. You'll get prompted for the application itself. Then you'll also get prompted for a license file. Now you don't know that you're being prompted for these, so you're just getting two prompts. Nothing is going to tell you that this is the reason why. But if you use the PowerShell module for Winget and you're using the export-winget package or whatever the full commandlet name is for that, you will get prompted to sign in twice. So just know that if you're on an unmanaged machine. If you're managed, we will take your credential that you're signed in with and you'll be good to go. So I'm not going to sign in here and waste the time doing that. So when I cancel, it tells me it fails because I just didn't sign in. But I wanted to mention this on company portal because I know a lot of you guys add it and you say, hey, why is this happening? That's the reason. But something else interesting that we can do here with this. So let's do a couple things. I'm gonna do some searches for Winget source applications like Mozilla Firefox. Now, depending on the result set that comes back, the search result list could be very large. So like this is 206 apps. It didn't really take too long. But if you have something that has like 800 apps or 1,000 apps, you might find that the search result list takes a little while to come up. That's expected. Nothing's wrong. Just give it some time to show up in the list. And so for Firefox, like there's 206 versions of Firefox. I can just go scroll up and down the list. I know what I want though. I want the EN US version of Firefox. I'm going to use this Winget x64 release. But let's say, we're very browser agnostic where we work, so you can install Google Chrome as well. So let's do a search for Chrome. And let's go ahead and add the latest version of Google Chrome. And let's go add another app. Let's do VLC. I know a lot of you guys use VLC out there. And so what you notice as I'm doing this is every time I select an app, I search for a new one, the previous apps are selected and they go to the top of the list. So I can keep adding apps in this way. I can pick the different architectures if I want. I'm pretty much just going to stick, most people are probably just going to stick with x64, but you might have middleware that you need to have both. Like maybe there's a runtime, like .NET 8 runtime. Not sure if this is the exact search term for it, but you might find where you need to have, it's not exactly that, but if you have any sort of runtimes out there, I know if I search for runtimer, it's going to take a while to expose all of those results in the list because there's just so many of them. But as you have different kinds of applications and you have like runtimes that you might have the need for x86, x64, we can download both of those architectures. So like VLC comes with two different they actually have the x86 and x64 version. And I'm sure Chrome and Firefox probably do as well. But if I download these apps, what you'll also notice here is that I'm doing these in parallel. So I'm not just doing one app after the other. Now I'm actually downloading things in parallel. And they're all going to go into my application folder under this Win32 folder. So in here I've got Chrome, I've got Firefox, and I have VLC. And they're probably not quite done yet. Yeah, the folders are here, and we're just waiting for the PowerShell module. So you can see that x86 is already here for VLC. It's making the folder, it's getting the content, and eventually the content should all kind of show up in there. Still waiting on Chrome. Okay, Firefox is done. Okay, VLC, x86 should be done, yep. And then just still waiting on some of these other ones. But these things are all going in parallel. So Firefox is done, VLC just finished, and then we're waiting for Chrome. Chrome is finished. So all three of these have been downloaded successfully. Awesome. And so for VLC, as I mentioned, we get the x86, x64 binaries in two separate folders. Firefox is just in one folder, and that's the x64 version. And then Google Chrome is the x64 version in its own folder. Now, what else happened, though, when we did this? Well, what you'll notice is that there is a applist.json file. It builds the applist.json file for you when you select to download. So in this case, my applist.json file, because I downloaded some things. Let me pull over. So you can see here that the JSON was created. It's got all of our apps. And you can see the stuff that I had put in earlier. So for these, I may want to just remove them because I didn't actually download them. And this is fully customizable. You can come into here and modify the JSON as you need. And then under orchestration, it creates this Winget Win32apps.json. Now, what's the difference between that and this applist.json? When we look at the Winget Win32apps.json, what this is doing is it's taking the YAML file command line and the arguments, and it's creating this JSON to include all that application information from the YAML file. So if you haven't looked at these YAML files before, whenever you download something from the Winget repo, you will get the file, the download file, and then the YAML file itself. So the YAML file has a bunch of information in it, and what we primarily use is this silent switch here, the silent command. So in this case, we've got quiet no restart. This is for Google Chrome. And if we go here for Google Chrome, we will see quiet no restart. What you'll also notice, depending on the application type, so in this case this is an MSI file for Chrome, our command line is actually just MSI exec. And then our arguments are /i and then the path to the file, and then the switches. And because this is a JSON file, you'll see additional backslashes in here to escape certain characters. So we're escaping the parentheses, we're escaping the extra or the other slashes. So you'll need to make sure that if you are going to edit these files on your own, that you make sure that they're well formatted JSON files. You want to make sure that you're not missing the extra slashes between, because these are just escape characters. So we generate that file for you. You don't have to create it, but you can modify it if you want. We also have priorities. The priorities for Winget apps don't really do anything yet. They may do something in the future. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do it or not, but you'll see here in a minute as I go into bring your own apps. But to round all of this out, and just to kind of explain again the actual reason for this file. So the way orchestration works is that we're going to take the whole apps folder and we're going to make an ISO of it, and we're going to attach it to the VM, and then when you install apps, we use that ISO. The orchestration folder within the Orchestrator.ps1, that's going to call out to install Win32apps.ps1. This reads this JSON file. And this is the file that obviously has the installation information for the applications. So that's why we generate this separate JSON. Generally speaking, I don't want to modify your JSON. If you're making your own applist.json file, we don't really want to modify this. We just kind of use this to tell Winget what to download. But this isn't what tells the VM what to install. This is what tells the VM what to install. Okay, so back in the UI. Now downloading things are great. If you want to just do a point in time, create your FFU, all good. But if you want to automate and create maybe an FFU every month with the latest Windows media or whatever, if that's the case, then you'll probably not want to download these things and be in the UI all the time. You'll probably want things to just operate on a schedule and have it all just run automatically. And so for that to work, you can create your own applist.json file directly from what you've selected here. So as we've talked about, when you download the apps, it creates one for you. But if you're not downloading the apps, then what you need to make sure to do is, as you're selecting your apps, save the applist.json. That'll go here. And then if you were to run the script, like if I were to run build FFU, if I were to run that and delete out, I can delete out this. I could delete this Win32 folder with the content because it's already here. If I deleted all of that and just had this applist.json file, then things operate the exact same as the prior code before the UI. So we would go out, we would download the Winget files from the Winget repo using the PowerShell module. We would download everything just like before. The difference though is that we will on the fly create the Winget Win32 apps.json file. So whether you download the apps and have it make it, or whether you just you save the applist.json file and just let it automatically install the apps, it'll generate everything that's necessary and install the apps silently without your intervention at all. So you have two options here. What I think most people do is once they get comfortable with things, they'll probably just have applist.json handle everything for them and then just have it automatically build their FFU on a schedule, using a scheduled task or something like that. You can also import an applist.json. So if I were to clear this list as it is, and then I click on import, go to applist.json, we get our imported list, and we also keep the architecture as well. So that's fairly handy for those that have a lot of apps, and because anytime you close out of the UI, it's going to lose whatever you had here. So having that app list, you can import it and then add new apps or remove them as you need to. You've obviously seen me clear the list, so you can do that. And that's pretty much it for the Winget support here. Now let's take a look at Bring Your Own Apps. So Bring Your Own Apps is, it's a little complicated, I think, if you're not really paying attention. So pay close attention to what I'm doing here. So I've downloaded Chrome, I've downloaded Firefox, I've got them in a separate folder. And so what I want to do is I want to just add Google Chrome. And you saw me do it through Winget, but maybe I don't want to use Winget. Maybe I just, and this application really doesn't matter. So just think if it's not Chrome, it's something else, whatever. But with Chrome, Chrome is an MSI file. At least it is from when I download it from Winget. You can download an exe of Chrome, but most people are going to download the enterprise MSI. So as you saw earlier, because it's an MSI file, what I want to do is I want to put MSI exec in here. Now, when you hover over this text box, it tells you that you want to enter the full path to the command line to install the app. This should start with dwin32 for exe, cmd, and other types of deployments that aren't MSI files. For MSI installs, you want to use MSI exec and then fill in the rest of the arguments in the arguments field. So we want to put MSI exec in here, and then I know that it's going to be /i, but then what do the rest of my arguments need to be? So for the arguments, you want to enter the command line. If the application is MSI, the command line should only contain MSI exec, and the rest of the command line arguments would go here. E.g. /i dwin32, the app name, and then the MSI file, and then the switches. So what this means is we want dwin32 Google Chrome, and then what is the name of the MSI? Well, I've got this in temp source. So for Google Chrome, this is the MSI file. So I want to copy this name, and I want to paste it right here. Then I need my switches. Where do I get those? Well, because this is just a downloaded file from Winget, I get the switches directly in the YAML file. So I can copy this and then paste it right in here. So now we've got our command. Now, why does it have to be this way? Well, the reason it has to be this way is because ultimately this is how the script is reading it. But when you mount the ISO to the virtual machine, the ISO is your D drive. So you have your C drive, which is just your BHDX, and then you have the D drive, which is your apps ISO. So the content is going to be in dwin32. So think of this from the VM's point of view. We need to have the ISO mounted. That's going to be the D drive. And then on the D drive, on the ISO, where do I want this content to be? Well, it's going to be in the Win32 folder. Google Chrome is going to be we're going to create a folder name of Google Chrome, and then we're going to use, and within that folder, we're going to use the MSI file, and then the switches. So it's important that it's in this format. If you don't do it this way, you just need to understand that the pathing is something that you could get confused by. So if you decide to not use the Win32 folder, you might want to use some other folder. If that's the case, that's fine. Just make sure you're consistent with where you're putting the content. But the way Winget works is all the Winget applications go to a Win32 folder. So just to make things consistent, you can put all of your Win32 apps into that folder, and then just install them as is. So that's the arguments. Now for the source, as you saw, I've got this folder here called ctemp source. And so in here, I'm going to put ctemp source Google Chrome. I could browse there if I want, but it'd be the same kind of thing. So that's my source, select the folder. There we go. So I want to add the application. Application's been added, name's Google Chrome, MSI exec, arguments. All this looks good. Let me go ahead and copy. So what it's telling me is that the following application folders already exist. They exist because I downloaded them through Winget before. Do I want to proceed and copy and overwrite them? Sure. So it's done that, copied successfully. Now the folder is going to be exactly, it's going to look, actually it's going to be a little different because it's probably an older version of Chrome, but same kind of idea. The only difference is that it's just older. So now if I wanted to do something else with Firefox, I can. I'm not going to go through that whole process again. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this list out, and I'm going to import a config file. Okay, so I've imported Chrome and Firefox from that config file there, and now I want to copy both of these. So let's copy the apps in. It says, oh, we see Google Chrome. So let's go ahead and override that, and then we'll copy and get Firefox copied in there successfully. So now I've got my apps, and then what you'll notice here is I got some icons on the right. I can move things up and down by priority. We'll probably do this in Winget at some point. I built this into Bring Your Own Apps first, but I didn't add it to Winget, and so we'll look at doing that probably before GA, maybe after GA. It's just going to depend on how much time I've got to integrate it. But I can move my apps up and down. I've got, only because I only have two here, so the arrows, all the arrows pretty much do the same thing. If they're up, then it's going to move something up. If it's down, then it's going to move something down. But if I add a third item here, so let's say maybe I just want to run like some command, like just like a CMD file or a batch file or something. So let's call this test CMD. Command line is just going to be, I don't know, run.cmd arguments. I don't know, whatever the arguments might be, but there's no source. So I don't have any source. I just want to run, or actually that's not true. In this case, there would be a source file for a CMD file. So if this is going to be a source file, then let me go and there's another file I got here that I can pull in. Let's pull in this test CMD file here. So we can pull test CMD. I think it's actually just called test.cmd. No arguments are needed in this case, so we'll add the app. And if I want to copy that in, I can copy it. It's going to tell me Chrome and Firefox are there, I know. And so now I've got test CMD there. So now I've got three apps. And so if I wanted to use my arrows over here to move things around, change the priorities, I've got test CMD here. I can move this to 1. I've got Chrome, I've got Firefox. I can move that, I move things down, up. So you can change the priorities pretty easy with the arrows. You saw me import, we've copied the apps, and then lastly, if I want, I can just clear the list out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And then I can go and run define app script variables. So app script variables, the way that these work is that there's a key value pair that we use for app script variables. So you might have a key and a value that, if I wanted to, I don't know, install like VMware tools or something. So I might have a key here that says VMware tools, and then the value might be, I don't know, true. So if I click add variable for key VMware tools, and then the value is true, there's a PowerShell script that actually corresponds to all of this on how to read those key value pairs. So if we go to apps and we go to orchestration, I've got a sample file here that has the JSON of VMware tools, true, and then foo is bar. And invoke app script is the script that's responsible for reading the app script variables. So if we go to VS Code and we take a look at this, I'm not going to read through all the code on this right now, but what's important is the example items here that have been commented out. So this is an example of how to use the app script variables hash table to control script execution. So everything up here is basically looking for your app script variables.json file. And if it finds the JSON, then you need to write the code in here for how you want to handle those app script variables. So in this example here, if app script variables foo is equal to bar, then we're going to execute whatever code would be within this if statement. And if you had a variable named teams, then we would, if that was true, then we would install teams. So this just kind of gives you an idea of how to leverage app script variables to make your installations dynamic. So you could have a big script, like this could have a bunch of different if statements or a bunch of different conditions to run if those variables are set one way or the other. So you might decide that I'm going to create FFUs based off of the app script variables key value pairs. And you might have a bunch of different ones. And depending on what you're building, you might be building servers. You could be building different hardware types that might require, like if it's a Dell machine, I might need to install like Dell command control, or if it's a Lenovo machine, maybe I install Lenovo system update or what have you. In those cases, you might have different app script variables with key value pairs that you set to true, false, or whatever the values you want. And that script will just automatically do all that work for you, depending on what your app script variables have been set to. And so, yeah, so that's how app script variables work. Let's see, let's go to Office. So Office is pretty simple. Install Office, just check the box, and you can change the location for the Office path. I generally just keep it default. You can now copy in your own Office configuration.xml. This only copies in the config XML, not the download XML. And this is important to understand because when we download Office, if you're using different languages, it's important that you modify the download FFU XML file to include the languages that you're going to download, or that you want to download. Because by default, we match the OS, so for me it's going to match English. But if you're using any other languages, you need to make sure that the downloaded content from the Office deployment tool is downloading the languages that you want. So we'll put some more work into this over time. I don't know exactly when I'll get to it, but we will need to add, I think, some support for maybe custom download XML files as well. And maybe even just a UI to create your own. That's going to take obviously some more time to do that, but it's on my list of things to look at. Okay, drivers. So a lot of discussion around drivers and how to make the process better. Currently today, we only download one driver package in the current 2505.1 script. Now we can download a heck of a lot more. So the way drivers works is that we have this new Drivers.json file, which you'll save. Either it can automatically save it for you or you'll have to save it on your own. But you save this in the drivers folder. And we're going to talk about that here in a bit as I start going through Microsoft drivers here. So for drivers, going into Microsoft, and I have selected to get models. And so this is going out to the Microsoft website, downloading the list of drivers, and it's showing it to you here in a nice nice little list view. And so from here, I can just go and select which drivers I want to download. So let me just go pick a bunch. And then I can select download selected. Now, what you'll notice here is that I just picked only Surface 3. And I did that on purpose because it's small. And I did 5 of these on purpose. Because what I want to show here is, A, we can only download 5 things at once. We'll go into the build tab and talk about how to increase or decrease the number of threads. So you can either download more or less of things at once. But if you were paying attention, you probably saw that we were extracting, and then there was a message here, it showed briefly for some of these, that we're waiting for MSI file lock to allow for extraction to continue. So we will download multiples, and then we will watch to see if there's any other MSI exec processes running, and if there is, then we'll step back, we'll wait until the prior download is finished extracting before we continue and try to extract on our own. So we just downloaded 5 different Surface models. Now, these models are all pretty much the same. So all the drivers, for the most part, are the same. There's probably just some different wireless drivers that are included, but for the most part, they all pretty much the same kind of size. But you saw that it was fairly quick. And if we go into drivers, we will see that I've got a few files here. I've got the Drivers.json, which I just talked about. And in this JSON file, we have Surface 3 for all of these, and then the link to go to download. The reason we include the link is because if you don't download them now and you want the script to download them as you're building the FFU, we need to tell the script where to go to download the files. And so this is telling it, download this from this URL. Now, as we look at Dell, HP, and Lenovo, their models look different. So when you combine all of that together, you're going to have a JSON that's got a lot of different information in it that's unique to each of the different OEMs. Now let's talk about driver mapping. Now I'm going to preface this by saying the DriverMapping.json file is unique in its best effort. I don't know that this is going to work for everyone. What I do know is that I've tested with some Surface models and with a Lenovo 300W, and the current code seems to do fairly well with automatically mapping the driver and model. So when you go to deploy your FFU, it'll automatically find based off of the information that's in WMI. I know that there's probably some work to be done here, and so this is why we're in preview, so I can get some feedback from people and understand how well things are working and what needs to be changed. But in the initial version of the code right now, this is working fairly well. Now, the way that this automatic mapping works is that we use the model that you see in here, and we automatically just take that and we put it right here. And then the driver path, this is the subfolder under the drivers folder on your USB stick. So your USB drive is going to be, to the OS, it might be the D drive, it could be the E drive that has your deploy partition. The deploy partition will have a drivers folder, and then it'll have a subfolder for the manufacturer, and then the drivers will be underneath that. So in this case, it would be whatever my deploy partition drive letter is, /drivers, /Microsoft, and then /Surface 3 Wi-Fi. And that's what you see in this folder. You see drivers, and then the model, and then the extracted drivers that the UI took for you. So this all is completely automated, but you can modify this if you want. So if you decide that it's not working, and there's really no way to automate it to make it work, then you can come into the JSON file and you can modify it as necessary. This is not hard-coded in any way. This is all just completely up to you. One thing that we don't have in the UI right now, and I've got it on my list of things to look at, is making a checkbox here to automate, or I'm sorry, a checkbox to remove the drive mapping automation, so you can just create your own drive mapping file and not have the UI get in the way or break whatever you might have. I know that's probably something we're going to need. I just haven't added it yet. Okay, so we've downloaded the drivers, and as you've seen, we've got our JSON file is here. And so if I decide, you know what, I don't want these drivers anymore, I don't need them, don't worry, just go delete the folder, not a big deal. And so what'll happen is, as you build your FFUs, as long as this drivers.json file is here, and you have selected that you want to do something with the drivers, whether that is installing the drivers to the FFU or copying the drivers to the USB, you have to decide one of these two things. Otherwise, the drivers.json file won't do anything. So you'll need to do one of those. And in most cases, because you're selecting multiple models, you're probably going to select copy drivers to the USB drive. But some people have asked, well, what about compressing the drivers? Because I've got tons of models. Some people say they have like 50 or 60 models that they have to manage. Well, we could also compress. So I just deleted those other drivers, but let's download them again with compression selected and see what happens. So we're going through, and you might notice that this is downloading Windows 10. You might think, well, why is that downloading 10? Why doesn't it download 11? Well, there just aren't any Windows 11 drivers for Service 3. So we'll try to download Windows 11 if we can. But if we can't, if there aren't any Windows 11 drivers, then we will go and download the prior version. So we'll back rev to Windows 10, because we know Windows 10 drivers and Windows 11 drivers pretty much work. Windows 10 drivers pretty much work for all Windows 11 releases for the most part. So we'll go ahead and do that. So now what you're seeing is we've compressed, extracted, downloaded, and we've got a few models that have completed already. Just waiting for a couple more here. And as these are finishing, if we go into the drivers folder, we'll see that these have all been created as WIM files. And we get a dialog box that pops up. It says download process finished. And now all of our Microsoft drivers are WIMs. And we remove the source folders to just a safe space. And this is what we'll copy to the USB drive. And then lastly, we have copy PE drivers. Now, one thing to note in our DriverMapping.json is that this changes a bit. So notice the driver path, everything else is the same, manufacturer model, but the driver path changes to a WIM file. And we can mix and match. If you wanted to use some with WIMs and some not, I don't see where you would prefer to do something like that, but if you wanted to mix and match, you can. You would have to manually do that though. The UI is fairly all or nothing. What you could potentially do if you wanted is you could download. So let me clear this list out. Let me just do one last thing here. Dump these. What you can do is you can download, let's get the models again. So let's just say I download this one. And I'm not compressing. Because I do this all the time. I go and I download a bunch of these and then I forget to compress. And a lot of these are pretty big. Like Surface is small, but you start going to other devices and you can have like 7 gigs worth of drivers. And so I might go through and I might select a bunch of models, download them, and I'm like, ah, shoot, I forgot to compress. Well, not a big deal. Just hit compress, hit download selected, and it compresses existing. So we'll go through, we'll find your drivers that have already been downloaded and say, oh, okay, you've now selected compress, so let's go ahead and compress them. So this will compress, remove the source folder, and bam, you've got that. So if you wanted to have some, for whatever reason, you decide that I want some of these to not be compressed and others to be compressed, you could do that if you wanted to. I got to think though that most people are just either going to do one or the other for everything. But you've got some flexibility there if you wanted to do something like that. And then we can copy PE drivers in. I know that we've got one PR that's out there for automatically determining PE drivers and copying them in. I haven't integrated that yet. I do want to. It is something that I think is going to be good because I forget to include PE drivers. And I think if we've got PE drivers, if we have drivers that have already been downloaded, we should be able to automatically determine which of those drivers can be added to PE. And so the code is already there. It's in one of the pull requests. We just need to pull it in and integrate it into the current process, which is different than the old one. So we'll look into doing that. But for now, if you wanted to copy PE drivers in, you can check this box, and then in this PE drivers path, you need to manually add PE drivers. So you'd have to go into here and manually copy in those drivers. That process has been around for a little while now. What I want to do is automate it so you don't have to go and figure out which drivers need to be copied from a driver source. And then lastly, the build tab, which is probably the most important. I mean, they're all important, but this is the one where all the magic happens. So this is where we have our FFU development path, our custom FFU name template. I generally keep it the same. I don't really change it, but you have that option. We've got a tooltip here that explains what the placeholders are. We've got our FFU capture location, share name, the FFU username. I keep all of these default. I don't really change any of them. And we have this threads item. So threads is new because we do things in parallel now. This is actually using the for each object PowerShell commandlet in PowerShell 7 that uses the dash parallel switch. And so this is what's allowing us to do things in parallel. So that's set to 5 threads by default. If you want to adjust this up to something higher, you can. I generally recommend just keep things at the default. This is what I test with, and for the most part, things seem to be fairly quick. But I know some of you guys like to tinker and play with things, so if you want to add more threads, feel free. Just don't yell at me when your box blows up because you're downloading too many things at once. But play with it, see what works for you. For our general build options, I'm not really too sold on things going left to right and then top to bottom, but that's kind of how things are right now. I'll probably change this to something that's better in the Fluent release when we give it a fresh coat of paint. But for now, it's got this kind of left to right here and then top to bottom for post build. But going through the build USB drive, this option has this hidden menu here that if you aren't building your drive, you don't need to see it. But if you are building your drive, there's some pretty important things. So one of the things I mentioned at the top was that we have the support for external hard disk media. We've had this for a while, but I think the switches or the parameters aren't really all that discoverable. I don't think we docked this in the formal docs, but we have docked this in the release notes. So for build USB drive settings, if you want to allow hard disk media, select that, and then by default we will prompt you just to let you know that, hey, we are going to use external hard disk media. Are you really sure you want to do this? And so we've got allow and we have prompt. I personally turn off prompt, knowing that my machine, I know the USB drives that are connected, but some of you guys might have an external hard disk that might have some, personal information on it or something you don't want deleted. So I'm trying to be cognizant of those situations, and I really don't want to accidentally format anyone's external USB drives that are plugged in. So that's why that's turned off by default. And if you want to prevent that, then you'll need to uncheck. But another way to prevent it is actually something new that we've added, and that's being able to select specific USB drives. So when you check select USB drives, this is an option that will let you pick what drives. And so I'm going to plug in a couple drives here, just so you can see how this works. And those drives will show up when you click on check USB drives. So here I've got a couple drives. I got this Kingston, I got the SanDisk, serial numbers, and the size. We leverage the serial number to identify which drive. We don't just use the model, because you might have a bunch of different USB sticks plugged in that could all be the same model. We actually leverage the serial number that we pull from WMI. So we can pick which drives that you want to provision and copy the FFU and the related files to. And we also have our copy Autopilot profile, copy unattend, and copy provisioning package. So if you use those files all sit in their respective folders, ppkg for a provisioning package, unattend for the unattend file, and then the Autopilot folder for the Autopilot JSON file. We don't really recommend using the Autopilot JSON anymore. That is something that Microsoft as a whole doesn't recommend using that. I think it still actually works, but we don't really tell customers to use that anymore. But it's there if you need it. And then for post, well, actually, hang on, not doing post build yet. Let's get out of the USB drive. And let's go take a look at Compact OS. So Compact OS, this just compacts the operating system. This has been a default for a long time. For most customers that aren't in education, and specifically in K-12 education or in environments that run smaller hard disks, you probably don't need to compact the OS. So you can probably turn that off. I've left it at default for a while. I haven't noticed really a big performance problem. It seems to work fine, but that's something that you may want to play with to see if it helps in any way. But by default, it's turned on. We will automatically update the ADK by default if you don't want that, or if you're in an air gap scenario, then you want to turn that off. Optimize, this is optimizing the FFU to make it so that the FFU is hardware agnostic. It can run on any hard disk. If you don't optimize, then the FFU is going to only show the amount of disk space that the machine that you use to capture the FFU from has. So if you captured a 30 gig hard disk, you're going to see only 30 gigs of usable space on the machine that you're imaging with the FFU. So I would always keep optimize on unless you're testing and you want to save some time. So when I test a lot of things, I'll turn off optimize, I'll turn off Compact OS, just so I can test things faster. But in production deployments, you'll want to have optimize turned on. And then VHDX caching. I like having this on because it makes testing so much faster. And so we'll cache the VHDX file. That file will end up in this VHDX cache folder. And then we have our create capture media and our create deployment media. Create capture media pretty much is always turned on, even in situations where you may not actually specify it. We do this because when you might turn this off and accidentally, but you're installing apps or you're installing Office or updates or whatever. In order for us to capture the FFU, we need the capture media to get it out of the VM and onto your host machine. So we will actually just go and flip that on for you if you forgot or accidentally unchecked it. In fact, the UI probably should show that, so that's just something I need to fix. Create deployment media. You may not always need to create deployment media. If you've already made it and you're not cleaning up the deploy ISO, then you could probably get away with not creating it all the time. But if you have it cleaned up and just create it, it just takes a little longer, but it's not really that big of a deal. Verbose, this will allow verbose output when the build script runs. I don't think you need verbose anymore. You'll see why here in a minute. But this will give you the same experience that most people have been using running the script with the verbose switch specified. Shows all the verbose output to the console. And then we have our post-build cleanup stuff. We clean up your apps ISO, capture, deploy ISO. We also can clean up drivers if you want. We can remove the FFU file. We can remove your apps folder content and remove the downloaded update files. Why this is cleanup and this is remove, I just decided to start writing remove instead of cleanup, but it all pretty much does the same thing. It's all just removing content that the process had created. My goal with this is to make it so that we don't leave a mess behind. But I also realize that maybe you want to create an FFU for one thing and then another and then another. And so you may want to keep this content. So the defaults don't remove that content, but you might decide that, hey, I want to remove, in fact, I want to remove all of this and just have a clean slate every time because I'm building a USB drive. The USB has what I need. And then if I need to build another one, I'll just build another one. And I don't want all the CRUD from the previous build to stick around. And then the last bit is the monitor tab. So with the monitor tab, this operates fairly similar to something like Config Manager's CM Trace tool. Not quite exactly the same, like I don't have the filtering and the find and stuff. We may get there at some point, but it's a pretty good V1 kind of release, I think. And we'll see how that works here in a minute. Okay, so I've got some things here. I'm gonna make some of my own changes here, and then I'm gonna run a build. So I've got my Windows settings. I've got the latest July ISO. That's good. All this stuff looks good to me. I don't need the latest CU because I'm running the July ISO. So August CU hasn't come out yet. So my media already has the latest CU, so I don't need to download it. But the latest CU does not have the latest .NET in it, and does not have the latest these items, so I'll keep that. For my applications, I kind of made a mess of my apps folder, so let me go and clean that up. So my apps folder, I don't really need my user apps list. I don't need the JSON. I don't need the Win32, and I don't need the store. So let me delete those. And then I don't need this Winget Win32. Now, what I want to do though is I do want to install an app though. So let's just do Firefox. Okay, so I'll do Firefox. We'll just do this one. We will save the applist.json file. You all saw how to do the downloads from the UI, so let's do this without having any content. For Office, let's go ahead and actually I'm gonna stop Office because it takes a while and just kind of sits for a while. So we'll stop that. And then for our drivers, let's do the same thing with saving to JSON. So we'll do copy drivers to USB, and then we will do compressed driver model. And let's remove this since we've already downloaded the files. So I'm going to dump these things here and then save the drivers.json. Okay, so that's going to be in the drivers.json folder. And so what that's going to do is it's going to download as the script runs. It's going to download, it's going to copy the drivers to the USB, it's going to compress those drivers. So even though it says already downloaded and compressed, I've already removed and deleted all that. So that isn't actually accurate. But it will download and compress them while the script runs. And then we're going to build. Now, for the USB drive, I've got, actually, let me get my, I've got a faster disk here. So we'll grab this. Okay, so we got the faster drive in there. So let's go ahead and select. So that's going to be the Samsung SSD. And I'm going to allow hard disk, but I'm not going to prompt. If I prompt it, it's going to ask me during the build. I don't want it to do that. We'll compact. Actually, no, I'll take compact off. It just takes too much time. Optimize is fine. Allow VHDX caching and create capture media, create deploy media. That's all good. I don't want to remove the FFU. I'll keep the downloaded files, and I'll keep the drivers. That's fine. Okay, so this is what I'm building. Now, before I build, I've got a couple buttons down here, and then I've got the build button. I've got save config, I've got load config. So save config, if I save the config, I can create my own config file. So preview video config, and it's just going to save it as a JSON file. Now, it'll also save as soon as I click build. So when I build, I'll always save to FFU config.json. So if I ever need to, if like I screw something up, if I said, oh crap, I missed something, I can close this out and then I can go and load my previous config. It doesn't automatically load your previous config. So you need to go and select that. By default, it'll just load the defaults. But you can go and always reload your FFU config.json if something happens or something breaks, or if everything's good and it's just a month later and you want to come back and load the last config you used and work from there, you can do that. And then lastly, we have build. So let's click on build and let's hope the demo gods are with me. And this all should work because I've tested this a billion times. But you'll see now that we go to the monitor tab immediately after we click on build. And so what you'll notice is this looks exactly like the log before. There's some changes, how we progress, tracking, and all that. But you'll see that we're logging, we're tracking. But what you'll notice as I click through this, the log is moving, but you don't see it moving because it operates kind of like cmtrace, where in cmtrace, if you click off of the last line, the log doesn't scroll on you automatically. But if you get down to the last line, it will automatically scroll. So we added some functionality to do that, which I think it makes things a lot easier. But as we're going through this, we're downloading our drivers. And there's a lot of stuff in here that talks about how we're downloading, like what we're downloading, the status, the progress. And a lot of the progress status that you see in here relates both to the UI and to the script itself. So when the script itself is running and it's downloading something, it's not updating the UI here. So when you see progress change here, it's not really updating it if the script is downloading the thing. These status updates are primarily if this was done in the UI itself. So some of the stuff that you see may not necessarily be relevant, but for the most part, it's fine. There's really no issues. And so we're going through. Everything's downloading, building. Everything looks good. Don't see any failures. We've made our apps ISO. That looks good. We're doing our caching. We're downloading our Windows updates. And everything's looking good. And now we're building the VHDX file with the install WIM from our ISO. And so what you'll also notice is we're tracking progress. We've got this green bar here, and that's going to obviously get to 100% at some point. And we're now just kind of waiting for the WIM to go to the VHDX, and that takes a few minutes, depending on how fast your machine is. It could be more than a few minutes, but that'll eventually finish. All right, so it's finished, and what you'll notice is it's automatically scrolling. So again, just like cmtrace, will automatically scroll. But if you see something that you want to read more up on and you don't want to just automatically scroll away, then you can go ahead and just click on whatever that item is, and the log will scroll, but you'll stay in place. So this makes it so that we don't need the verbose parameter anymore. You'll still need it if you want to just manually run the script and not do this through the UI. But if you're building your FFU just directly from the UI and never automating or doing anything through the script itself, then you don't need the verbose parameter. If you are running the script by itself, though, then you either need the verbose parameter or you need to run something like cmtrace, or you can use Notepad if you want, but Notepad, you have to close and open it every time something changes. Okay, so now our VM's being built. So here's the VM. Here's the progress in the background. So while the VM's getting created here, we're creating our WinPE capture media in the background. So we mount PE, and then if you had your PE drivers in, we'd add those too. And that capture ISO is just going to sit and wait until the VM's done. But the VM's going to take some time to load up here. So it looks like the capture media is complete. And now we're just waiting on the VM. And when you see these progress indicators that say like progress and then some number, that number corresponds to how far along this bar is. So if it says 50, then we're halfway through. All right, so the VM is now booting into audit mode. And then once we get into audit mode, we're going to start going through the orchestration process. And that's when the Orchestrator.ps1 file checks to see what it needs to do. And so depending on what you've selected, then it will, it'll install Office if you selected that. It'll install Defender, Edge, MSRT, any MS Store apps, and then your Winget and bring your own apps. All right, so in the background here, we've got our orchestrator. And so it's a lot more readable than what the prior script was with the install apps and sysprep. Now we can see exactly what phases we're on. And so right now we're installing our Win32 apps through the Winget win32apps.json file. What you'll notice is that we're trying to install Firefox, but we're waiting on another installer. That installer is Edge. So Edge is packaged as a cab file, but I think deep down it's actually an MSI. That takes some time to install, and we don't want to step on Edge's toes and potentially run into any issues. So we check to see if that is running, and if it is, we'll back off and wait. And so we just check every 5 seconds. And we just installed Firefox. That was all good. We didn't detect any user app list.json, so we're not going to install any of those. And so now we've completed our Win32 app installations. And now we're doing disk cleanup, and then we're going to do sysprep. So pretty straightforward. This was not very complicated at all, but I know a lot of you guys have tons of apps and tons of things that you guys are putting into your images. And you should be able to do all that. I think I've done every single store app. In fact, I'll have in the deep dive video as I go through some of the other stuff. We'll talk about some of the changes that have been made between July 24H2's ISO, July 2024's ISO and the July 2025 ISO of 24H2 from Windows 11. Store apps have actually gotten significantly bigger in terms of overall size. They're like 2.9 gigs, I think, between store apps and the latest Windows updates, you're looking at a stock ISO of about 2.9 gigs of stuff that you have to download. When you use FFU and you update all the latest store apps and everything else, we get you down to about 600, 700 megs. So pretty significant difference in terms of how much content you have to download with a stock ISO in July 2025 versus a fully patched and updated FFU. All right, so now that the FFU is done building, we are now going to do capture. So as you see here, the log has been moving. We're doing some optimization work, and now we're starting the VM. So another change in the VM when we do the capture is that I've put some more information on screen about what we're doing. And this could be helpful in situations where some of you guys might be having errors during the capture process. Unfortunately, logging is difficult to do here because we're in PE. And if there's a failure, we may not actually even be able to write the failure to wherever we're failing to. Because if I can't get out of the VM, I can't really copy anything to your host. I could copy it to your Windows installation in here, but if we can't get out of the VM, now the log file is going to be in your VHDX that you'll have to mount and then grab the log file from there. So we could do that, just haven't really looked at the feasibility of doing that. I think it'd be fairly simple to do. It's just I'd have to tell people when troubleshooting, hey, go get the VHDX file, mount it, and then get the log. So something to think about. But as you can see now, we're capturing. So the capture is going to go through. And that capture is going to your host, and it's going to your FFU folder here. And it's using the custom name template earlier, so Win11 24H2 Pro, and then it gives the year, month, date, and the time. And then we capture out the DISM log, just in case there's anything interesting from that if we need to troubleshoot. And that's it. Now we're just going to do some manipulation of the FFU file. So we need to optimize it to make it so that it can run on any other media, or on any other device rather, and use the full disk space. So again, if we did not optimize, we would only have a 30 gig hard disk on whatever machine that we're deploying to. So this allows us to take all the disk space that we can on the drive that we're deploying to. And this 2-minute file lock, I wish I didn't have to do this, but prior to not having this, we would have random errors that we couldn't service the FFU for some reason, and what we found out was that there were just file handles that were still attached to the FFU file, and so we need to make sure that those are released before we do the optimization. So DISM is going to optimize this FFU file to make it so we can use it anywhere we want. So 2 minutes are necessary. Don't change these if you're like, hey, I don't want to wait 2 minutes, it's a waste of time. It's not a waste of time. At least it wasn't when I put the code in. Maybe things have changed since, but I still recommend just keeping it. Okay, so now we're going to do the optimization. And as it says, it'll take a few minutes, depending on how fast your machine is, but this does take some time. And while this is doing that, just something to, well, I was going to show you guys the size of the FFU, but because it's being serviced right now, it's showing us 0K. But I think before it was like 9 gigs maybe. So if you're not used to FFUs, just know that they're fairly big. And so when you're thinking about what USB media to use, I know some people, yes, 9.5 gigs. I know some people have been using 16 gigs. And I didn't really include drivers or anything in the FFU itself. But as we build the USB drives, we will be copying. We'll be copying drivers to the USB drive. And so that's about to happen. We're making the deployment media. And then once the deployment media is made, then we're going to start copying drivers over to the USB drive. So this just added Firefox. Now, well, Firefox in the .NET, Defender, OneDrive, MSRT. But it's about 9.5 gigs. Well, a 16 gig USB, you're going to have this 9.5 gig file. You'll have a 2 gig boot partition that we make for Windows PE to boot the USB drive. And then whatever drivers. So a 16 gig USB stick may not be all that sufficient. You might be able to fit like one driver package maybe in your FFU. But if you're installing any of their apps, then that's going to make the FFU size a lot bigger. So you probably are looking at 32 gig minimum for USB stick size. But 16 gig might be kind of close. Okay, so now we're doing the copy to the USB drive. And we do this in parallel now. So before we would do it sequentially. So if we had 4 drives connected to the machine, we would do one after the other. We now leverage parallel threading, so we can do multiple drives at the same time. So I only selected one drive, and so that's all I'm going to get here. I do have 2 drives plugged in, but I only have one that I selected, and so it's putting the FFU onto my faster SSD drive. And so that's all done. And so now, script duration 17 minutes to do the whole thing. And that was all done in one take, no cuts, no edits. Everything all worked as expected. So now that we have the FFU made, what does it look like? So I'm going to use a VM here. And a lot of people have had questions about how to do this. And I've got a bunch of different VMs here. The one that I usually demo off of, I use the same VM all the time. So I want to call out how this works. So if you want to test on a VM, you need to make sure that your VM has 2 hard drives. You're going to have your regular drive, just whatever you would install Windows to, you need one drive for that. But you need a second hard drive that's going to have your FFU file. Basically, this is your deploy partition on the USB stick. So on your USB stick, when you look at the USB drive, let's talk about that first, I guess. On the USB drive, you'll have a boot and a deployed partition. So on my USB stick here, I've got, well, actually, I don't know which one. I guess it doesn't really matter. I've got a boot and I've got this deploy. And this is the old one. Hang on one sec. Okay, this is the right one. This is the one we just made. So H and I are the drives that I just made. So your boot partition has WinPE, and then your deploy partition has your drivers and your FFU file. So drivers, we have Microsoft, we've got our WIM, we've got our driver mapping, we've got Drivers.json. So that's all good. And then we've got our FFU file. So what I need to do is I need to mimic this in the VM. Now, when we boot, the name of the deploy partition is important because we look for a USB drive that has the name deploy. And that's how we determine which drive to use to look for our FFU file and drivers and whatever else. So when I create my FFU source.vhdx, that file needs to actually have a name that has the word deploy in it. So when I look at this, I've got this FFU source folder. I've got on my D drive on this box, I've got this FFU source folder, and this is the VHDX. So if I mount this, now let me take these USB drives out because it's going to be really confusing. Okay, so the mounted VHDX file has a name called deploy. If you have a VHDX and it doesn't have a name on it, it's pretty simple to add one. Just right click, go to properties, type in deploy. That's it. That's all you gotta do. Now with your VHDX file, just copy in the files that would be expected on the deploy partition. So on my USB drive, I'm actually going to delete out this FFU file. This is the one that I was testing with a while ago. I'm going to go to my FFU folder. This is the FFU we just made. Copy that. And we'll put that on the deploy drive. Now, if it's a brand new VHD that you just made, it could take a little while to copy. It's got a size, and it's most likely to be a dynamic VHD, so it's got to expand itself. So that'll take a little bit of time. But then this is where you can also add in your unattend file. So if I wanted to add unattend, my PVKG, my Autopilot, my drivers, I can just go over here, and if I had a provisioning package file in here, I can just copy this folder, copy the unattend, copy the drivers, copy Autopilot. I can just copy these and paste them right into this deploy drive. And so in doing that, I've mimicked what my USB drive would look like. So that's all we do with the script. Is that if I selected those items, it would copy those into my USB drive. So now I've got my FFU. I already have an unattend that I've been using, so I don't need to copy one in. But I do have drivers in PVKG. These are, I put ones after them if I don't want them to do something. So because the script won't find them otherwise. But if I do want to come and show something, like so for instance, driver mapping here. My driver mapping file here, in order to test some stuff, I've modified this driver mapping file to say if the model is virtual machine, then install these surface drivers. So this just helps me test the code. It's not like the drivers, I don't really care if they install or not. I just need to test the code to make sure that it works. So I've got that. So I already have some drivers, some WIM files in here. So I'll just use these just to kind of show what the end result experience is going to look like here. And then I'll leave everything else. And then I need to make sure that I am ejecting. Now that that's ejected, I just go back to my VM. I just got to make sure that I'm booting off of my DVD drive and make sure that the DVD drive is leveraging my my deploy ISO. Now, I didn't save the deploy ISO, so I don't see a deploy ISO in my FFU development folder. But if I unchecked in the build process here, if I unchecked this and said do not clean up the deploy ISO, then the deploy ISO would be sitting in this folder. But I've saved my ISOs off to a different drive. So I've got my FFU deploy x64 ISO file here. So I'll use that. And then I'm good to go. So we'll boot this. And so you'll know that this looks completely different. We've got so one little trick here. If you click into the window, it'll put you into selection mode, or it'll say select administrator. Allows you to select text and all that. If you keep it selected, then this doesn't move. So it'll stay put, and we can talk about what we see on screen. So we've got our new title banner, FFU Builder. It's the name we're going to go with. And we have some sections of information. So some people have asked, like, hey, can you display the manufacturer, the model, serial number, processor, memory, disk, logical sector size, display all that stuff to me or to my technicians so we know what the hardware we're dealing with. So we're doing that. We're telling you which FFU file we're selecting. There's only one file, so that's all we had to select. If we had multiples, we would ask you, and you would pick which FFU file you want to use. And then for device name selection, there's only one prefix, so we're going to use that. And then for driver selection, this is where we're doing the driver mapping with the DriverMapping.json file. So we found a potential match with the manufacturer, Microsoft model virtual machine, and then this is the path to the WIM file. And we have our automatic match found, and we're going to select this driver source, which is a WIM file, and we're going to use the Surface 3 Wi-Fi WIM. Okay, so if I hit enter, this will then continue on. And we are going to apply the FFU, and then we will start to do the drivers application. All right, so we got the FFU applied, we did our unattend, and now we're doing drivers. What you'll notice that we mount the WIM file. We don't copy the content to the drive, we just mount the WIM. And then we inject those drivers. Now, this can take some time depending on the model, but for Surface 3, it's a fairly small device, so the drivers are very, very small. And that's it. The drivers have been injected. If this was a physical machine, I could pull the USB drive out, I can move on to the next machine. It took longer than it should have because I talked through like the majority of it. But you saw how fast the FFU applied itself, and then the drivers applied fairly quick. But in general, you can have a machine imaged in less than a minute. If you don't have a whole lot going on. If you've got a lot of drivers, or if you've got like a big driver package or something, that's probably where you're going to spend the most time. But in most cases, I see people get the FFU applied in less than a minute, probably even 30 seconds to 40 seconds in some cases. And once that's applied, pull the USB stick out and move on. You don't have to sit and wait for it to load like you're seeing on screen right now. You don't have to sit and wait for all that. Just take the USB stick out, move on to the next device, and keep your process going. It'll drastically improve the amount of time it's taking you guys to image. And with that, I guess we can just kind of sit and watch and let this thing go. But there's really not a whole lot to it. It's just literally just a Windows 11 24H2 machine. Actually, one thing I do want to show you guys, because testing these things, getting out of OOBE, I think is somewhat important. And how I do it in my testing is I actually use a provisioning package to bypass OOBE, and I put it in an ISO file. So I can record a separate video on this. It'd take a little while to kind of explain all of it. But in how often I have to test, I can't sit here through OOBE every single time. So what I personally do is I take a provisioning package, I build it, and all I do is I just have it bypass OOBE. There's an option in Configuration Designer, bypass OOBE. You select that. I think I put a local admin account just so I can get into the machine. And that allows me to just quickly get through OOBE. So here I can hit the Windows key 5 times. I'm in a VM, so I hit the Windows key 5 times. I get this menu. Select Install Provisioning Package, hit Next. And then this is going to put an admin account, bypasses OOBE, and then it's going to reboot, set the device name. You don't have to set a device name if you don't want to, but it just goes through and it does it. And this allows me to bypass OOBE, get into the OS, and I can then just validate and make sure that everything worked the way it was supposed to. So like if I wanted to check, updates, for instance, in general, you should see 2 updates. You'll see if you install Blaze cumulative update and everything, you should see Defender, and you will see Defender, and you'll see Windows security. There's a security tool, the task tray icon for Windows security. That tool, there's an update. I actually download and install that when we update Defender, but for some reason that update doesn't it's not showing up to Windows Update, so it just re-downloads it. It's fine, it's very small, but you'll see those two updates in general if you've selected all the other ones. Okay, and while we're waiting for this, let's actually talk about the rest of the deck, because there's a couple things I want to highlight here. So focus areas for the preview. If you're coming across any failures, let me know. What you just saw in the demo, nothing is edited. That's end to end. It took a lot longer because I explained everything one by one, but you didn't see a single failure. That was a full, one-shot item. It worked surprisingly well. Actually, not really all surprising. I've tested it 1,000 times, so I know that it's fairly solid. But I don't know what I don't know. So I don't know what's going on in your environments, security policies, stuff like that. Different security tools do different things. The tool is doing a lot of PowerShell, a lot of DISM. There are things that certain tools might flag just because it looks suspicious. You've got full access to the code. There's really nothing nefarious going on. But you might have to put in some exclusions in Defender or whatever your AV security tool is to make sure that we're able to write to the places that we need. In general, I do recommend if you can get an unmanaged machine, just something that's not joined to your tenant, that provides the best experience. But it does cause a problem with downloading store apps through Winget because you get prompted. So what you could do, and what I do, is I actually use my device on the Microsoft tenant, and I'll download the apps from there, or I'll just set up a VM, I'll install the UI, or I'll download the files for the UI, and I'll download all the files from the Microsoft Store source. I'll download those from there, from that VM that's joined to something, and then I'll copy those from there to my machine that's going to be doing all the building. So I have an unmanaged machine that's doing all the build work, but I've got a managed machine that I can use to download all my store apps. And so that helps get away from the prompts where it's prompting me to sign in every time. So you've got some options there. But if you're coming across failures, let me know. That I just don't know what I don't know. So let me know. Driver mapping, as I mentioned, this is going to be best effort. I don't think I can automate every scenario. I'll try, but there's just going to be things that I just won't be able to do. And so you'll have to go and modify the DriverMapping.json file. For Winget apps and bring your own apps, these are currently two separate processes. As you saw in the UI, there's two different checkboxes. The way that this works is that Winget apps will install first through the Orchestrator. What I want some feedback on is, will merging these and allowing them to mix like a task sequence be better? I think I know the answer to this is yes, but it's going to cause some additional work that I probably won't get done maybe until next summer. Just because I'm going to have to rework a lot of things. And so if the Winget and bring your own apps functionality works fine and there's no issues, then great. But I do know that there are situations where we have dependency chains where we need certain apps to run before others. So if you need .NET, you need C++ runtime, you need something that needs to install one before the other. The bring your own apps scenario will handle that. With Winget, because you can't really change the priorities right now, even though in the JSON file for the Winget Win32 apps JSON file, that allows you to modify. There's like a priority field, and you can modify. You can't really modify it in the UI. So if you want to go and modify the XML or the JSON files and change the order, you can definitely do that. There's just no way in the UI for Winget apps right now to move applications around. So you'd have to select them in the appropriate way. But if you want these to merge, where we have like a Winget app runs first, and then a Bring Your Own app runs second, and then a Winget app runs third, and then a Bring Your Own app runs fourth, like if you want to have these things kind of go back and forth, let me know if that is something that you want. Because if it's popular enough, I can look at doing it, but again, it's just going to take time. But right now, I think we have some options where you're not blocked. It would just be more of like a nice to have. Now, Lenovo drivers, just this past week, I found out that Lenovo added a cookie/token to their PSRef site. So if you have Lenovo devices, Lenovo's been kind of annoying to deal with because they use this machine type, and they use machine type and model. And so machine type to them is like this, it's not even really their serial number, it's just this 4-digit code that they use to identify a machine. And then they have their model name. And there's no good public reference for the machine type and the model outside of their psref.lenovo.com website. They do have a catalog v2.xml file that they use for a lot of their tools that provide downloading for drivers, so like System Update. And there's a couple of others that they have too. And so but those tools don't include, I think they don't include consumer, or they don't include all consumer devices. And when I say consumer, education falls under consumer for a lot of the lower end devices that they sell. So what this means is that if you wanted to tie into that catalog v2.xml file, you can't actually get the Lenovo 300W, 500W, which is their later lower end, the newer lower end devices that they have. And so a lot of those devices just aren't there. So I've referenced the PSRef site to grab the make and model, or the make, model, and the machine type. And that's worked well up until last week. And so over the past 2 days, I've been trying to rack my brain around how I can get this cookie token that they require. So I've got a solution for it. It is in this build, it's working. But it works in a pretty funky way. Because they generate this token through JavaScript, I'm using Edge in headless mode to navigate to the site, to get the cookie, to read it with DevTools, and it pulls the cookie value out, and then I'm passing that over to the script to make the appropriate calls to get all the model information. So it's very, very, it's very complex. I'm not super happy with it, but it works, and it doesn't seem to be causing any issues for me. I tried using it on our internal tenant, didn't have any problems with Defender or anyone yelling about it, but if you use Lenovo, let me know. Let me know if this is a problem. I might have to go back and use catalog v2.xml. I don't want to, but I might have to do that. The other alternative is that I force you to just go to psref.lenovo.com and you'll get the cookie and you'll get the token, and then everything will work. But I think that's annoying. So if you've got other solutions, or if you've played with this before, you know what I'm talking about, help me out, let me know. Okay, some other known issues to fix. Again, driver mapping. I think I need to put a checkbox in there to automatically, to allow you to automatically create the driver mapping file, so you can either check or uncheck it. Because right now it's going to always create it, and I think in some cases you're probably going to have a mapping file. We don't want to modify it, or it just the automation just doesn't work for you, and you just want to do it manually yourself. So I need to handle that. The home tab, I'm going to spruce that up a bit, put some prereq checks, a link to the documentation, which I got to write new docs for all of this. And then any new release notifications, like what's new, all that kind of stuff. I've got some plans for that. That'll probably happen over the course of the next year. I just don't know exactly when. I'll get to it. And then we got a bullet point at the top here. Update the styling to leverage Fluent. So we're going to, or that relies on the .NET 10 release that's going to come out. But it's going to come out shortly before Windows 11 25H2 comes out. So once that's out, I'll look at, or I'm planning to get that. I think that's going to probably be my priority, is getting Fluent in before some of this other stuff, unless there's some like functionality that's like completely broken for you guys. But Fluent's going to be one of my priorities. I almost had this working, like it was very, very close, and then I had to scrap all of it. So hopefully the work that we're doing in .NET 10 will solve for that. Okay, so providing feedback. I've put 2 categories in for the discussions folder or discussions area in the repo. Go there to provide your feedback under UI preview. For general discussion, just discuss things you like or don't like, any changes that you want made. All that stuff should go there. For any issues, don't post them in the main issues area, which is in the top left, in the screenshot there, top left. It's got this issues tab. Don't put them there. Put them in the discussions tab under issues. That's going to be a better place for it. If it's an issue that I need to move, then I can move all that stuff. But for now, I'd like it all just kind of collected under UI preview. And then that way we can kind of work on the stuff together from there. All right, but with that, it's done. 2 hours. I was hoping it wasn't going to be this long, but it is what it is. If you have questions, post them in the GitHub repo. You can post them in the comments section here. I prefer comments in the GitHub repo rather than YouTube, but wherever you want to comment, that's fine. Also, let me know how you're using the tool. I need the feedback. I need to know how well things are working. If they're working well for you, if they're not, let me know. I just like hearing your guys' stories. And if you want to share with people, you can post things on Reddit, post them on X, post them Blue Sky, wherever you hang out. If the tool works for you and it saved you a lot of time, then let other people know too. Because I don't really promote this outside of here on YouTube and in my repo and in some of the one-to-many presentations I do for Microsoft. Outside of that, I'm not really promoting elsewhere. So you guys kind of do a lot of that stuff for me. So thanks. Appreciate it. And with that, thanks a lot. Take care.